symbol of knowledge, symbol of warmth, symbol of freedom. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. Here we gather to celebrate hope and the infinite possibilities of love.
Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Happy Sunday, August 16th, 2020. Great that all of you can join us this morning, this Sunday morning, virtually, remotely. Today is our 8th and our last event in our 2020 Summer Forum Speaker Series. Today we have two speakers, Dr. Gerald Lazar and Joe Edeiken. Together, their shared topic is depression and bipolar disorder, defining diagnoses, case histories, and their relationship to suicide prevention. Dr. Lazar has been a practicing psychiatrist since 1970 in Baltimore and in Salt Lake City. He has been in private practice and has been conducting research at the University of Utah Medical Center. Joe will be speaking to us from San Diego. He is a family friend of Dr. Lazar. Joe will perform two songs he has written, songs of struggle and songs of hope. When Jerry and Joe conclude their presentations, we will take 1 minute for the church offering. After the offering, both will be happy to engage in a lively Q&A period until 11 o'clock. If you have questions, and I hope you do, please type your questions into the Q&A and I will present them to the speakers. So Joe Edeiken will begin, and welcome, Joe.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me. I'm going to start off with a song called Just Another Love Song. I wanna write about the world, just how it has let me down. I wanna write about my life, how I tried to take it once. Everybody just wanna hear another love song. Everybody just another love song. A song when the friends come over they can put on. Everybody just wanna hear another love song. I wanna write about my day, just how things haven't gone my way. I wanna write about my girl, how she decided not to stay. Everybody just wanna hear another love song. Everybody just wanna hear another love song. A song when the friends come over they can put on. Everybody just wanna hear another love song. But maybe I'm addicted to the sad songs. Maybe too long. Singing about love is like falling on a knife. Maybe I'm just bitter cause I have none in my life. Everybody just wanna hear another love song. Everybody just wanna hear another love song. Song when their friends come over, they can put it on. Everybody just wanna hear another love song. Everybody just wanna hear another love song. Everybody just wanna hear another love song. So the friends come over, they can put on. Everybody just wanna hear another love song. Right, that was that. So I guess I'm just gonna start talking here about my history and all that. I just want to say hello again and thanks for having me. Can everybody hear me? I can't see you, so I'm just gonna assume that you can. Okay. So yeah, depression and I have had a pretty long and entangled and messy history. I guess just to give some context to my perspective, a little history. I grew up and I would say I was a relatively happy child. And then kind of around puberty, I don't know what happened chemically, you know, everything's reforming, changing, all that stuff. But I experienced depression for the first time in high school when I was about 15 or 16, and it just really hit hard. And the hardest part about that is, you know, you don't know that you're depressed. At least I didn't. I didn't know I was depressed. I thought, well, this is how the world is, and nothing will ever change. And this is who I am, and nothing will ever change. And I didn't get too much counseling or anything like that. It was a very vulnerable time in my life. So that went on for a while, and I think I was put on just like a, you know, basic antidepressant. I'm not sure. I've taken so many at this point. I have no memory of what that could have been. But the years went on. I went to college. I failed out of college because I was just inoperable, basically. And then I moved to Boston, trying to possibly pursue the music school avenue. And instead was sort of plagued by not only ongoing depression, but obsession with. So at this point, I was put on, I tried many antidepressants. In Boston, where I was for 3 years, I must have tried 20. So the diagnosis of treatment-resistant depression was sort of becoming more clear, becoming more accurate. And I would just, you know, I'm a very, very proactive person. So I spent basically 3 years reading every book I could, doing everything that everyone says. You know, at this point, I sort of embraced the diagnosis a little bit more. I still was skeptical and thought it was just me and I was pathetic, and, you know, a lot of the things that depression brings with it. But I was starting to explore the avenues of treating depression. Although pretty very unsuccessfully. You know, in the meantime, I was trying everything else, you know, diet, exercise, meditation, things that I still try today, although have never, to be honest, have never quite worked for me. I'm a pretty interesting case, I think, because not many things work for me at all. So I sought out every treatment. In Boston, I sought out so many different things. I was seeing psychiatrists, I was seeing psychologists, I was in a program for both. I did CBT, DBT, you know, let's see. I mean, so I guess it sort of culminated at the point of therapy, which was a hard thing to do. It was a hard thing to do. You know, it started to work. I mean, it's very invasive, very traumatic. It started to work later on in the treatments. I did the maximum amount allowed for me, which was 24 treatments, which is pretty intense. I mean, you know, I'm being put under anesthesia, and the memory loss, both short term and longer term, which I deal with. But yeah, the thing about that for me is it started working. It actually, in a weird way, saved my life later down the line, because it started working for short, it just like let me, it just lifted the depression, something that hadn't happened for years. And it was like, oh, this is what it feels like to be normal. So that really helped. That really helped. And it gave me ammunition later on to tell the difference between me being depressed and what's normal. So after that, though, after the treatment started to not work, I really couldn't take care of myself anymore, and went to stay with my aunt and uncle in Tucson, Arizona, where I, you know, continued with therapy, continued with trying medication. And you know, the ironic found a medication that actually worked for me for the first time is that, you know, up until that point, I'd have a lot of really caring psychiatrists, really caring and really, you know, just their heart was in the right place. In Tucson, I had just like the total pill pusher, didn't even know me, didn't remember me, psychiatrist. But I'd read about Cymbalta and wanted to try Cymbalta, and got on that from him, and that was what had like significantly turned things around for me. Within a year, I was, you know, pursuing music. I'd moved to San Diego, and then I'd moved later on to Austin, Texas, and then later to New York. And the Cymbalta really, really carried many, many years. I would say like 10 years. So that was sort of a miracle. That was a miracle in my life. And sort of made me realize, for me, I mean, you know, I can meditate all I want, I can run all I want, I can jump, swim, whatever it is. And it's a chemical problem, you know, it doesn't matter, you know, yeah, it really opened my eyes to just how strong the chemical component is for me. So jump to last year or two, I had an incident where basically Delta was sort of not working anymore. And got really, really depressed, and ended up trying to take my life. I swallowed a lot of pills, and it was not an attempt. It was not a cry for help. It was, well, I mean, I guess it was an attempt theoretically, but it wasn't meant to be. It was meant to definitely do the job. But I was found the next morning by my roommate, who called the ambulance and all that stuff. So I'm doing a lot. I'm doing better now. I guess basically my point is I've tried everything in the book. What I'm doing now is ketamine, which has been very successful for me. I've had to go back and do some treatment, maintenance treatments, but I'm definitely doing a lot better now. Ketamine is a strange experience, to put it mildly. People who ask me about it I try to describe it, and I would say that as someone who's done a lot of psychedelic drugs, and had, for the most part, really beautiful and therapeutic and moving experiences with them, nothing compares to ketamine. Ketamine is the craziest trip I've ever been on, and I've done it probably 13, 14 times. So my mind is definitely expanded quite a bit from just traveling the multiverse of time and space. Yeah, so now I am better. I wish that I did meditation. I did transcendental meditation. I was doing it for about 4 months, 40 minutes a day. For me, it's just the results. I mean, nothing beats being on the right drug. I really wish that I could say differently, but there's been times when I don't exercise, times when I don't, when I feel really good and I'm not exercising, I'm not meditating, I'm not doing this or that. I do try to see family and be around friends as much as I can. But when I get really depressed, I isolate. I just watch movies. I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to do anything. Yeah, so I think I'm going to pass it off to Jerry, who's like family to me, and amazing to say. If there's any questions you have for me, I'll be around. And I believe I'm going to play another song for you in a little bit. But yeah, thanks for listening.
And thanks, Joe. Thank you for your honesty, your openness, your authenticity, and your courage, and your willingness to join me in this presentation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I love you. You know that.
And I you. We've known each other for 35 years.
Yeah, since the beginning.
Right. So today I'm going to be talking about major depressive disorder, which Joe has, and he's got the worst kind, the treatment-resistant kind. I'm going to be talking about bipolar disorder, suicidality, and I think most importantly, what you can do as the individual with one of these illnesses or as part of the support system. We've all felt blue or down in the dumps on occasion, but that's so different from what Joe has described, or I will later get into when I discuss bipolar disorder. Joe is in good company in terms of other people who have had major depressive disorder, and I'm just going to name a few, in no special order. Lady Gaga,
Michael Phelps, the Olympic swimmer, Bruce Springsteen, J.K. Rowling, the author, Buzz Aldrin, the astronaut, Jim Carrey, Robin Williams, both comedians, and historical figures, Abraham Lincoln, Ernest Hemingway, Sigmund Freud. And these are just a few of the many famous people who suffer, who have suffered from major depressive disorder. In fact, an estimated 7.1% of all US adults had at least one major depressive disorder episode in 2017, the last year of data collected by the NIMH, National Institute of Mental Health. That 7.1% translates into 17 million, more than 17 million people. Well, let me describe some of the symptoms of major depression, of course, some of which Joe already mentioned. But there are two essential features of major depressive disorder. Number one, a period of 2 weeks during which there's either a depressed mood most of the day and nearly every day, or number two, a loss of interest or pleasure in nearly all actions and activities. Here are the 7 major symptoms we look for as psychiatrists in making the diagnosis. Insomnia or hypersomnia nearly every day. If you've been in a situation where you just couldn't sleep one night, you know how badly you can feel the next day. But can you imagine if this were to go on day after day, week after week, sometimes month after month? Leaving you fatigued, which is the second symptom, having a loss of energy nearly every day. Significant weight loss when not dieting, or weight gain and changes in appetite is another symptom. Impaired ability to think or concentrate, and or indecisiveness, which can be a combination of the depression or the insomnia. There's something called psychomotor agitation, this inability to sit still, feeling like you have ants underneath your skin. Or psychomotor retardation, just the inability to get going, just sitting kind of like a blob. Even though you want to get going, you want to do something, you want to feel better. There's feelings of worthlessness or excessive guilt. There's recurrent thoughts of death, recurrent suicidal ideation without a plan, or a suicide attempt or a suicide plan. These symptoms cause significant distress or impairment in social and occupational areas of functioning. To meet the diagnostic criteria for major depressive disorder, there should be no history of a manic episode or a hypomanic episode, both of which I'll describe a little later. I just mentioned suicide as the 7th symptom, but definitely not the least important. So what are the risk factors for suicide? And before I get into that, let me mention there are at least 1 million suicides per year in the world. So this is a major, major issue. A family history of suicide is very important. It can serve as a model or give permission to the individual considering a suicide. A family history of child maltreatment, a previous suicide attempt or attempts, a history of mental disorder, particularly clinical depression, and very, very important, a history of alcohol and substance abuse. This can really complicate things. Feelings of hopelessness come up when you don't see any light at the end of the tunnel, when you don't see any hope for anything, and you just want to give up. And Joe talked about that a little bit. Impulsive or aggressive tendencies tend to increase your risk. Cultural and religious beliefs, especially where a belief that suicide is a noble resolution of a personal dilemma, can really be an issue. Isolation. Joe mentioned he just wanted to be by himself, didn't want to be bothered by anything. And then you wind up feeling cut off from other people. I'll just mention here what COVID has done. You know, think of the isolation that someone has depression and feels, and then on top of that is imposed further isolation from people who normally would insist on being with you just because they love you and no longer can be. Losses can really impact the risk. A loss of a spouse, a loss of other relationships, loss of work, financial difficulties. And again, what COVID has been doing in terms of job loss and financial loss has really been an issue. Physical illness can complicate anybody's life, but can really lead to a feeling that you're never going to get better. It also drains you of energy. Easy access to lethal methods. The rate of suicide, the rate of successful suicide is much higher among men than it is among women, though the rate of attempted suicide is much higher amongst women than amongst men. But recently, the sale of guns has gone up dramatically ever since the beginning of COVID. And now more women are buying guns, which is increasing their rate of suicide. So we are in a time in this country where having a gun and being depressed is a horrible combination. There are also those individuals unwilling to seek help because of the stigma attached to mental health and substance abuse disorders or to suicidal thoughts. So given this list, what are some of the protective factors that can help you from suiciding or attempting suicide? I think one of the biggest one is family and community support and staying connected, even though the illness itself really drives you to isolating. Isolating is terrible for people who are depressed, and it snowballs, and more you isolate. Support from ongoing medical and mental health care relationships. Joe mentioned he had some really good support in Boston, which was so important. And then when he was in Tucson, he had a psychiatrist who didn't even know his name, couldn't keep track of things, and was a pill pusher, as described by Joe. And they exist, but he happened to push the right pill that really helped. In his case, it was Cymbalta. If you have skills or can learn skills, and they are teachable, in terms of problem solving, in terms of conflict resolution, and nonviolent ways of handling disputes, they can all be preventative factors. And then, of course, having cultural and religious beliefs that discourage suicide and support instincts for self-preservation, useful, very useful. There's a national suicide hotline number, 1-800-273-TALK, T-A-L-K, or 8255. That can be helpful. And there are also local suicide hotlines. So I hope you have a better understanding of major depressive disorder. I'd like to now turn to bipolar disorder and mention some of the famous people with this diagnosis. Carrie and Eddie Fisher, Catherine Zeta-Jones, Francis Ford Coppola, Frank Sinatra, Jimi Hendrix, Mariah Carey, Richard Dreyfuss, Sting, Ted Turner, Winston Churchill, all highly functional despite the challenge of this illness. And so what are some of the symptoms of bipolar disorder? Whereas major depressive disorder affects 5 to 7% of the population. Bipolar disorder is less frequent and affects about 1 to 2% of the population. It includes the symptoms that I mentioned about depression earlier. It also includes symptoms of mania or hypomania. Bipolar disorder is characterized by mood swings that fluctuate between depressive lows and manic or hypomanic highs. A manic episode is described as a distinct period of abnormally and persistently elevated, expansive, or irritable mood and increased goal-directed activity, at least in the beginning, before it deteriorates, with more energy and lasting at least 1 week. The symptoms of mania include inflated self-esteem or grandiosity, decreased need for sleep, being more talkative than usual with a pressure of speech, flight of ideas, racing thoughts that can't be slowed, easily distracted, increase in goal-directed activity, as I mentioned earlier, which often deteriorates and the focus gets lost. And last but not least, excessive involvement in potentially reckless activities, which usually involve drugs, money, or sex. With bipolar disorder, the mood episode is severe enough to cause marked impairment in social or occupational functioning, or to require hospitalization to avoid self-harm. There are 2 types of bipolar disorder, and understanding the different types of bipolar disorder can help distinguish between bipolar disorder and depression. It's important to make that distinction because the treatments are different. Bipolar 1 disorder. This is diagnosed when a patient has had at least 1 manic episode, regardless of whether or not there has been a depressive episode. Bipolar 2 disorder. This diagnosis is given when a patient has had at least 1 depressive episode and a period of elevated mood referred to as hypomania, HYPO. Bouts of hypomania are not as extreme as mania and are shorter lived. Patients with bipolar 2 tend to experience longer depressive episodes and shorter states of hypomania. They often seek treatment during the depressive episode, as the hypomanic symptoms might not impact functioning as much, and even in some individuals, if it's not too severe, can be very enjoyable to the individual, and they look forward to further episodes of hypomania, which impact the effectiveness of treatment because of discontinuation of medication. Again, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Let's talk a few minutes about bipolar and depressive treatment. Left untreated, both bipolar and major depressive disorder can have a major impact on social and occupational functioning. Both include the risk of suicide. The good news is that both conditions are treatable. Combination treatments often work best in both cases. And possible treatment modalities include talk therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, which Joe mentioned, CBT, you hear that abbreviation, dialectical behavioral therapy, he also mentioned that, DBT, family therapy, medication management. I don't have time today to go into all the different antidepressant medications, mood stabilizers, antipsychotic medications that are used. But there are different treatments, and it's important to distinguish because some of the medications are contraindicated for one illness and not for the other. Should also mention that our newer treatments, which are being used, and Joe mentioned ketamine, which has just come on the market recently in the last couple of years. He also mentioned ECT, which is not new, but very effective, reserved for when medications have been ineffective. And now, in the last few years, there's something called TMS, which is transmagnetic stimulation. Experimental modalities include magnetic seizure therapy, where you actually get a seizure from the magnetic treatment, deep brain stimulation, and vagus nerve stimulation, all of which are being used here and there, but not commonly. Lastly, my talk goes to what can you do as one with the symptoms or as a friend or family member of that individual. First, let me talk about the person with the symptoms. Seek treatment, stay in treatment, and be honest with your therapist. Get on medication, stay on medication. Keep in touch with friends and family and be open with them. And if you are feeling suicidal, use the word suicidal. Don't hint around the bush. A very difficult one is be patient, because you've had to be patient through all the treatments, changing medications, all the decisions you've had to make, which were hard. But be as patient as you can. Don't lose touch with hope. Surround yourself with positive people. Avoid negative people. And all of this is very difficult when you have very little energy and feel so terrible. And that's where friends and family come in. And as friends and family, what can you do? Stay in touch with the individual. And this can be a long haul. Be positive. Be patient. Support therapy and treatment. Some individuals are in families where therapy is viewed as very negative. And so if you are a friend of someone in that situation, you're going to have to take a strong position that therapy is important. You may need to actually take them to appointments because of their insomnia or lack of energy or hopelessness. Remind them that they have an illness or symptoms, but that is not who they are. Take the word suicide seriously and call for professional help if needed. That's the end of my talk, but now we have the opportunity of listening to Joe with a song of more hopelessness after Tim says a minute of please donate.
Right, Jerry and Joe, thank you so much, both of you. I'm looking at about 15 minutes that we have remaining, so let's take 1 minute for the offering, and then we'll return for questions and answers, okay? 1 minute. Okay, we're back, And looking, we've got less than 15 minutes for questions and answers, so maybe we'll forego a second song and go directly to questions, because we have several here in the chat box that we need to address. But the first one deals with the here and now. This year, after heart attacks and strokes and after cancer, now the #3 cause of death in this country is this terrible virus. And Jared, if you could just speak a little bit more as to how to cope with the consequences of this virus, both as a family matter, when people get sick, positive, and also the loss of a family member. We've had over 167,000 Americans die this year. That sense of loss that you talked about.
Yes, I feel the most important thing is staying connected. Look to your family for support. If you've lost someone in your family, talk about it, talk about them, share memories. People who deal with their grief directly, openly, and speak about it have a much shorter grief period than those who just close up, clamp, and isolate. So it's very, very important to stay connected. If things are not getting better for you, to seek treatment. Grief reactions can turn into a prolonged depression. So getting help is extremely important. I'm not sure if, with only 50 minutes, maybe that's all I'll say right now to that question.
Both of you talked about suicide, and you mentioned guns. There are more guns in America than there are people, over 330 million people. Each year, about 85% of Americans take their lives to suicide with guns, only 15%. We probably can't reduce the number of guns, but what can we do more in terms of at least the awareness that if there's a gun in the home and a person is depressed, what more can be done to lower that rate?
Yeah, one of the first things I always do is involve the family members to get that gun, to make sure they're locked up, better still, out of the house, nowhere near where the individual can reach them and not even knowing where they are. So I ask family members to get involved, remove the guns from the home. And I ask patients if they don't have family members. Actually, I've had patients bring guns in and leave them in my office until, you know, the period of depression is lifted.
Yeah. For both of you, this matter of suicide and depression can be shameful in the minds of many. I've attended a number of funerals here in Utah where the cause of death is not brought up. We know it was suicide, but it's not mentioned during the service because somehow, some way it's perceived to be sufficiently shameful that it should not be acknowledged. How do we change that mindset?
One thing I think is that if obituaries should include it. I've only read one obituary in the last few years where it actually said suicide was the cause of death. I think the more we talk about it, the more open we are about it, the less stigma there'll be. And I do think that's happening, even with COVID-19 right now. The rise in suicide has occurred, and the rise of depression has occurred. And that is getting into the press, and I think that's been very positive. Joe, do you have anything you wanted to say to that?
I mean, not really, other than just, I mean, it's people don't mention it for a reason. It's a very sad, sounding thing. Trouble talking about it as well, so.
Ketamine. You mentioned it's a new drug, and it was a drug that helped you, Joe. Could you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah. So let's see. You do a back-to-back session, sort of full week So maybe about 7. I didn't really feel anything till maybe 6, 7, 8. And then I felt depression free and really great for like 3 months. And then I came back in, and then it was like another 2 or 3 months and came back in. I had to come back in the middle of COVID because a lot of what Jerry's saying, you know, applied to me with isolation and also boredom and all that stuff. But yeah, you know, a lot of people saying good things about going in, but I'm definitely a believer now, and it's expensive is the thing. It's like $500 a shot, so it definitely took out some of my savings, but it's like, you know, save lifesaver or saving money, you know. That's unfortunately you have to choose. Well, it's an obvious choice, but you do have to part with some money in order to do it, as it's not current right now.
When you were feeling suicidal, Joe, did you feel existentially alone?
Oh yeah, I think the two go hand in hand. Well, maybe not. I mean, I think there's religious people that are suicidal as well, but I'm not particularly. And yeah, I mean, I don't think being depressed and having the worldview that nothing really matters anyway conducive to happiness. So yeah, there was definitely some existential dread, but even when I'm feeling good, I'm always a little existential anyway. But yeah, I don't think it helped.
Okay. Lee Stanhope had asked about ketamine, and Dr. Lou Bordnick in the chat room in the Q&A says, ask about depression as a spiritual crisis. I wonder if both of you could speak to that.
Yeah, Jerry?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Oftentimes, I'm afraid that in therapy, the whole issue of spirituality can sometimes not even be brought up. And one's connectedness to not necessarily religion, but religion can be very central, but to one's sense of one's place on the earth, and one's connectedness to others and to nature. I think it can be a lifesaver in terms of a practice of spirituality, a practice of meditation. Joe has said that he does practice meditation. I might want to say a few words about that, Joe. But that's something I do on almost daily basis. Find it very helpful. Encourage my patients to do that. Encourage my patients, if they are involved in a religious institution, to stay involved. That can be a very important support group. Joe, I sort of heard 2 messages from you. One was that meditation hadn't worked early on when you were in Boston. Is it something that you practice now or are doing more of? And is it helpful?
You know, for me, it's at least with a transcendental meditation, doing it 40 minutes a day is not really that helpful. I do want to get back to sort of more of the breathing focused meditation, and maybe just doing it for a smaller amount of time. Yeah, in terms of the original question, when I was younger, thought that my whole problem was that I had not found God. Not that I was depressed, but that I just had not been saved. And I've never been, I grew up in a Jewish family, but I did have a mentor of mine try to sort of convert me, and really, it really messed up my head. But I can definitely say, I feel better. I definitely don't believe in that anymore. I don't see the necessity of a higher power in order to be happy. So, but at the same time, I definitely can see where Jerry's coming from with connectivity and spirituality as opposed to sort of the religious aspect. But I can definitely see those helping out. And when I feel really good, I feel those things as well.
Thank you. Dr. Kemi Collette has this question in the Q&A, that patients with no health insurance have few options in getting care until a crisis, such as a suicide attempt. So her question is, how do uninsured patients access care in Utah?
Well, that is a very difficult question. One I have a lot of feelings about in terms of the insurance system in this country. A lot of our insurance is connected to employment. This is a period of unemployment. So many people not only lose their jobs, they lose their financial security, and they lose their health insurance. Of course, many of them can qualify for Medicaid, but Utah does not have one of the best, is not one of the best states in terms of coverage. They chose not to expand their coverage like most other states did, to the degree that most other states did. And personally, I'm a believer in a one insurance system, centrally located, where everybody is covered. Other countries in Europe do it, and they do it quite successfully. So what do we do for people who don't have decent coverage? They can always go as a walk-in to an emergency room. Yes, they may get a bill, but there are many places that will overlook those bills as long as you take the time to apply. And again, that's another hurdle we've put in their way. I mean, the first question many people get asked when they go to an emergency room is, what is your insurance, not what's your problem? And it's really, I think it's disgusting.
Right. Poverty is certainly a reason. Today's Washington Post has this story headline: fewer Black teens seek treatment for depression, mental health, despite data revealing Black youths in the U.S. experience more illness and poverty and discrimination than white young people in the nation. And so a question, if we see the problem for those who are disadvantaged economically, so forth in this country, then what are possible solutions to ease this problem?
Well, we do have what's called a county mental health system. I was working in California this past winter at the Santa Cruz Mental Health Clinic. They may charge patients nothing. They may charge them $2 or $3 per session, but it's a viable system. We have it in Utah also, and I encourage people to use that. I will say that we have many systems in this country to discriminate against Black people, and that's just one of them. There are how many millions of people in our jail system, and that's our new Jim Crow system. So it's again, it's an area that this country has never faced, never dealt with. Whereas South Africa, look what they did after the apartheid was over. They had open courts. They weren't sending people off to jail for what they had done, but they were openly discussing it. We've never done that in this country.
We have about 5 minutes remaining, and you just touched on a key point that today in America, jails and prisons are America's mental health government facilities, which we know are very inadequate. Solutions: large mental health hospitals again, small outpatient units.
Okay. Yeah, I think both of those suggestions are excellent. I grew up in state hospitals, and that's not because I was a patient there, but because my father was a psychiatrist in New York State. And so each time he got a raise in position, we moved to a new hospital. All my friends' fathers were psychiatrists. I thought that was normal. But getting back to your question about jails, I worked in the Santa Cruz jail system. There, in that system, the mental health clinic, the Santa Cruz Mental Health Clinic, covered the jail. And I was very, very impressed with that system. I saw patients sometimes twice a week if they needed to be seen. You know, that's not something we have in Utah. Utah, the county jails are not manned very well. Even the prisons are not manned very well. Excuse me. And we do need to improve the quality of care in prisons and jails. Small mental health clinics could help. I do think that state hospitals were closed too early. There are a certain percentage of patients that were institutionalized and needed to stay in those hospitals. And there are certain patients today that would benefit and do better with long-term care, not having the constant pressure of being thrown out of a state hospital, or when you go to a regular hospital, psychiatric units are trying to get people out in 3 to 5 days. When I started as a psychiatrist, it was 2 to 3 months that patients stayed in inpatient units if they needed to. So there's all sorts of changes. I think there are newer treatments that are very helpful that can be done as an outpatient. ECT can be done as an outpatient. Ketamine can be done as an outpatient. So transmagnetic stimulation is being done as an outpatient. So as more medications come online and more alternative treatments come into play, I think we'll do better.
Before closing, a last reminder about our coffee hour gathering. But first I want to thank you, Joe. Thank you, Jerry, again for this. This is excellent. And before closing, want to encourage everyone to attend the coffee hour gathering to follow. And while I know, Jerry, you have to depart, Joe, we invite you to join us in the coffee hour. And during that time, you could, if you want, play your second song for all of us in the coffee hour. For all of us, please use the Zoom link that is in the chat box now, or find the link in the Torch email or the church website. And the password is that unique word to Unitarians, coffee, lowercase, C-O-F-F-E-E, all lowercase. If all else fails, send me an email and I will send it to you. So our church service has concluded. So I'm going to extinguish the chalice. Now, today is our final 2020 Summer Forum Speaker Series event. We've had 8. This is the 8th one, and it's the last one. It's been made possible by good teamwork using the new Zoom communication tool. We didn't think we'd be doing this when the beginning of this year, 2020, began, and so it's been a learning experience for all of us. Please acknowledge all the members of our Summer Forum team. Lee Schuster, Don Walton, Linda Smith, Christine Ashworth, Kathy Chambliss, and I am Tim Chambliss. This week, look in your email for an online survey about Summer Forum. We would very much appreciate your feedback on this year's speakers and topics. Let the church know how these events can be improved. Please join us for our coffee hour. Next Sunday, August 23rd, Reverend Tom Goldsmith will be back. Summer Forum will be over, and Reverend Goldsmith will be with us for the beginning of the church year. Look for links to the service in your email next Saturday. Thank you all for attending this summer. Please, please stay healthy and safe. Thank you.